The bitter wind howled like a dying animal as Rebecca Hartley stumbled through the blinding white wasteland, her swollen belly heavy beneath her torn dress, knowing that each step might be her last. The morning had started with accusations and ended with violence. Rebecca's father had dragged her from their homestead outside Gila City, Arizona, by her hair, his face purple with rage and shame. Her condition had become impossible to hide, and when she refused to name the father, claiming he was dead and gone, her father declared she was no daughter of his. Her mother had wept, but said nothing, too afraid of her husband's wrath to intervene. Her two brothers had loaded Rebecca onto a wagon and driven her 15 miles north into the higher elevations, where winter still gripped the land with icy fingers, despite it being March of 1882. "You brought shame on this family," her older brother Thomas had spat as they shoved her out into the gathering storm. "You can freeze with your bastard child, or find some other fool to take you in. Either way, you are not coming back." Rebecca had begged, had pleaded, had promised she would work harder, eat less, stay out of sight, but their hearts were as cold as the wind that now cut through her thin clothing. They left her there on that desolate ridge as the first heavy snowflakes began to fall. She watched the wagon disappear into the white distance, taking with it her entire life, her entire world. She had tried to walk back toward town, but the storm intensified with frightening speed. These late spring blizzards in the higher elevations were notorious for their fury and unpredictability. Within an hour, Rebecca could barely see her own hands in front of her face. The wind pushed her sideways, and she lost all sense of direction. Her feet, clad only in worn leather boots, had long since gone numb. Her fingers were stiff and useless inside her thin shawl. The cold was a living thing, wrapping around her, squeezing the warmth from her body with patient, methodical cruelty. Rebecca's thoughts became sluggish, confused. She thought of the baby growing inside her, the child of a love that had burned bright and brief before consumption took him last November. James had been a traveling merchant, handsome and kind, and they had planned to marry. But death came swift, and by the time Rebecca realized she carried his child, he was 2 months in the ground. She fell for the first time when her boot caught on a hidden rock beneath the snow. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, and for a long moment, she simply lay there, feeling the cold seep deeper into her bones. "Get up," she told herself. "Get up, or you will die here." She managed to push herself to her knees, then to her feet, swaying like a drunkard. The world had become nothing but white noise and white emptiness. There was no sky, no ground, only the endless suffocating blanket of snow and wind. Rebecca's eyelashes froze together. She had to keep blinking hard to see anything at all. Her dress was soaked through, the fabric stiff with ice. The baby moved inside her, a small flutter of life, and that more than anything kept her moving forward. She fell again, and again. Each time it became harder to rise. Her mind began playing tricks on her, showing her visions of warm fires and hot meals, of her mother's kitchen and the sound of her father's laughter from better days, before the drought had made him mean and desperate. The 4th time she fell, Rebecca did not get up. She could not. Her body simply would not obey her anymore. She lay on her side, curled around her pregnant belly, and felt a strange warmth beginning to spread through her limbs. Some distant part of her mind knew this was death approaching, knew that the warmth was a lie, her body told itself, as it surrendered to the cold. But she was so tired, and the warmth felt so good after the endless, bone-deep cold. She closed her eyes. Benjamin Quincy had been tracking the elk herd for 2 days when the storm caught him by surprise. He was a weathered man of 28, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of creek water under shade. He had learned his tracking skills from 3 years spent living among the Apache before returning to the white man's world, and those skills had kept him alive and relatively prosperous as a hunter and scout. He supplied meat to the mining camps scattered throughout the territory, and occasionally hired on as a guide for wagon trains or survey parties. The storm had come up faster than he anticipated, and Benjamin cursed himself for not reading the signs better. His Apache teacher, an elder named Nantaji, would have been disappointed. Benjamin had a small camp about 3 miles northeast, a line shack he used when hunting in this region, and he turned his horse Buck toward it immediately, knowing they needed to get to shelter before the worst hit. Buck was a steady buckskin gelding, sure-footed and smart, and Benjamin trusted the horse's instincts almost as much as his own. They were making good time despite the increasingly heavy snowfall when Buck suddenly stopped, ears pricked forward, nostrils flaring. "What is it, boy?" Benjamin asked, leaning forward in the saddle. Buck took 2 steps forward, then stopped again, tossing his head. Benjamin trusted the horse too much to ignore this behavior. He dismounted, holding the reins, and moved in the direction Buck seemed focused on. The snow was falling so thick now that he could barely see 10 feet ahead, but there, barely visible against the white ground, was a darker shape. Benjamin's heart lurched when he realized it was a person. He rushed forward, dropping to his knees beside the figure. A woman, he realized immediately, and pregnant from the swell of her belly, visible even through her ice-crusted dress. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as death, her dark hair frozen in tangles around her face. "Jesus!" he breathed, pressing his fingers to her throat. He could barely feel a pulse, just the faintest flutter beneath her cold skin. She was alive, but barely. Benjamin did not waste time wondering what she was doing out here, or how she had ended up in this situation. Those questions could wait. Right now, every second mattered. He scooped her up in his arms, alarmed by how light she was, how cold she felt even through his heavy coat. He managed to drape her over Buck's saddle, then swung up behind her, holding her secure with one arm, while guiding Buck with the other. "Go, Buck! Get us home." The gelding needed no further urging. Horses had a sense about storms, and Buck knew where shelter lay. Benjamin held the woman tight against his chest, trying to share what warmth he could, though he knew it was not nearly enough. The ride to the line shack took nearly 40 minutes, though it felt like hours. By the time the small log structure appeared through the white curtain of snow, Benjamin's arms were aching, and his face was numb from the cold. He half fell from the saddle, pulling the woman down with him, and kicked open the door of the shack. The interior was dim and cold, but it was shelter from the wind. He laid her on the narrow cot against the far wall, then turned immediately to building a fire in the small stone fireplace. His fingers were clumsy with cold, but he had done this 1,000 times and could practically do it blind. The kindling caught, then the larger wood, and soon a fire was crackling and beginning to push back the cold. Only then did Benjamin turn his attention to Buck, bringing the horse into the shack as well. The space was small, barely 12 feet by 12 feet, but Benjamin was not going to leave his horse outside in this storm. Buck would provide extra warmth, and Benjamin owed the horse his life many times over. He stripped off his own wet coat and hat, then turned to the woman. Her condition was critical, he knew. He had seen men die from exposure in the cold, had learned from the Apache about the dangers of freezing and how to treat it. Her wet clothes had to come off immediately, or she would die. Benjamin hesitated for only a moment, respecting her modesty even in her unconscious state, but necessity overrode propriety. As gently as he could, he began removing her frozen dress. The fabric was so stiff with ice that it cracked as he peeled it away. Her undergarments were equally soaked, and those had to go too. He worked quickly but carefully, trying not to jostle her too much, aware of the child she carried. When she was stripped down, he wrapped her in his bedroll and the 2 wool blankets he kept in the shack, then pulled the cot closer to the fire. Her skin was so pale it looked almost translucent, and her lips were a terrible shade of blue. Her breathing was shallow and irregular. Benjamin knew from Nantage's teachings that rewarming someone who was frozen had to be done slowly and carefully. Too fast could kill them just as surely as the cold. He positioned himself on the cot behind her, opening his shirt and pulling her back against his bare chest, sharing his body, heat skin to skin. He wrapped the blankets around both of them, creating a cocoon of warmth. The fire crackled and popped, gradually warming the small space. Outside, the wind howled and the snow continued to fall. Benjamin held the strange woman close, feeling each shallow breath she took, willing her to live. He had no idea who she was or what circumstances had led her to be out in that storm, but he knew that finding her was no accident. Buck had sensed her presence and led him to her. Benjamin was not a particularly religious man, but he had learned from the Apache to respect the way things happen for reasons not always clear in the moment. Hours passed. Benjamin kept the fire fed, occasionally getting up to add more wood, but always returning to the cot to share his warmth with the woman. Slowly, gradually, he felt her body temperature begin to rise. Her skin grew less cold to the touch, though she remained unconscious. The terrible blue tinge faded from her lips, replaced by a more natural pale pink. It was nearly nightfall, though the storm made it hard to tell time, when she finally stirred. Benjamin felt her move against him, felt her breathing change from shallow and slow to deeper and more regular. Then she made a small sound, somewhere between a whimper and a moan. "Easy," Benjamin said softly, his voice rough from hours of silence. "You are safe. Do not try to move too quickly." Her eyes opened, unfocused at first, then widening with confusion and fear. She tried to pull away, but Benjamin held her gently in place. "Easy," he repeated. "You were freezing to death out in the storm. I found you and brought you here. You are safe, I promise. But you need to stay still and stay warm." Rebecca's mind struggled to catch up with what was happening. She remembered the cold, remembered falling, remembered the strange warmth that had crept over her as she lay dying in the snow. But she was not dead. She was warm, wrapped in blankets, and there was a man's voice speaking to her with calm assurance. She could feel the heat of his body behind her, could hear the crackle of a fire nearby. "My baby," she whispered, her throat raw and painful. Her hand moved to her belly. Still there," Benjamin assured her. "I can feel movement. The baby seems to have weathered the cold better than you did." Rebecca closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lids. Alive. They were both alive. The relief was so overwhelming it hurt. "Where am I?" she managed to ask. "My line shack, about 15 miles north of Gila City. We are stuck here until the storm passes. Could be a few hours, could be a couple days with these spring blizzards." "You saved my life." "Found you just in time. Any longer out there, and we would be having a different conversation. Can you tell me your name?" Rebecca Hartley." "Benjamin Quincy. People call me Ben." He paused, then asked gently, "What were you doing out in that storm, Rebecca?" Fresh tears came at the question, and with them the full weight of what had happened came crashing back. She had been cast out, abandoned to die by her own family. The shame and grief threatened to choke her. "They left me there," she whispered. "My father and brothers. They drove me out because I am pregnant and not married. They said I brought shame on the family. They left me to die in the storm." Benjamin felt a cold rage settle in his gut that had nothing to do with the storm outside. What kind of men left a pregnant woman to freeze to death? He had seen cruelty in his time, both from white men and others, but there was something particularly vile about this kind of calculated abandonment. "They drove you 15 miles into the high country and just left you?" he asked, needing to be sure he understood correctly. "Yes. Told me to find someone else to take me in or freeze. They did not care which." Benjamin was quiet for a long moment, processing this information. "Well," he finally said, his voice hard, "you are alive despite their cruelty, and you are going to stay that way, you and your baby both. I give you my word on that." Rebecca did not know why the promise of this stranger meant so much, but it did. She found herself believing him, trusting him, even though she knew nothing about him. Perhaps it was because he had already saved her life. Perhaps it was the steady calm in his voice, or the gentle way he held her despite the impropriety of their position. Or perhaps it was simply that she had no other choice but to trust him. "Thank you," she whispered. They were quiet after that, listening to the storm rage outside. Benjamin carefully extricated himself from the blankets, making sure Rebecca was well covered before he stood. She watched him through half-closed eyes as he moved around the small space, stoking the fire, checking on his horse, pulling supplies from various corners. He was tall and lean, built like someone who spent their life outdoors doing hard work. His movements were efficient and economical, no wasted motion. His face was handsome in a weathered way, with strong features and eyes that held both kindness and hardness in equal measure. Rebecca guessed he was somewhere close to her own age of 21, maybe a few years older. "Are you hungry?" Benjamin asked, glancing over at her. "I have some dried venison and hardtack. Not much, but it will keep us going until the storm passes." Rebecca realized she was famished. She had not eaten since a small breakfast the morning before her family cast her out, and her stomach was cramping with hunger. "Yes, please." Benjamin brought her some of the dried meat and a piece of hardtack, along with a tin cup of water from his canteen. Rebecca struggled to sit up, clutching the blankets around her, suddenly very aware that she was naked beneath them. Benjamin seemed to sense her discomfort and turned away, busying himself with his own meal to give her some privacy. The food was tough and bland, but it was sustenance. Rebecca ate slowly, her stomach unsure after going so long without food. The baby moved inside her, stronger now, and she felt a fresh wave of gratitude that they had both survived. It seemed impossible, miraculous even, that this cowboy had found her in the vastness of that white storm. "How did you find me?" she asked after a while. "In all that snow? How did you even see me?" "I did not," Benjamin admitted. "Buck did, my horse. He stopped and would not move forward until I checked what he had sensed. Animals have instincts about these things that we have lost. I learned to listen to them. Then I owe my life to both of you." Benjamin finally turned back to face her, his expression serious. "What will you do? After the storm passes, I mean. You cannot go back to your family." "I know." Rebecca looked down at her hands, at the blanket wrapped around her. "I have no idea. I have no money, no place to go, no skills beyond keeping house and sewing. And I am pregnant with no husband. No one respectable will hire me or help me." "What about the father of the child?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears again. "He died. Last November, of consumption. We were going to be married, but he took sick so fast. He was gone in 3 weeks. By the time I realized I was carrying his child, he was already 2 months in the ground." Benjamin nodded slowly, processing this information. He moved to sit in the room's only chair, a rough-hewn thing he had made himself, facing her. "I am sorry. That is a hard thing, losing someone you planned a future with." "Did you ever lose someone like that?" Rebecca asked, studying his face. "No," Benjamin admitted. "Never let myself get close enough to anyone to plan that kind of future. I have spent most of my adult life alone, hunting and scouting. Lived with the Apache for a while, learning their ways. That is not the kind of life that lends itself to settling down with a wife and family." "Do you like being alone?" Benjamin considered the question. "I am good at it. Whether I like it is another matter. It has its freedoms, but it has its costs too." He paused, then changed the subject. "You should rest. Your body has been through a terrible ordeal. Sleep will help you heal." Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to stay awake and figure out what she was going to do, but exhaustion pulled at her with insistent fingers. The warmth of the fire, the food in her belly, and the safety of the shelter after the terror of the storm all conspired to drag her down into sleep. Her eyes drifted closed despite her best efforts, and within moments she was breathing deeply, unconscious once more. Benjamin watched her sleep, his mind working through the problem she represented. He could not just abandon her after the storm passed. She had nowhere to go, no resources, and was pregnant besides. The honorable thing would be to help her, but he was not sure what form that help should take. He could give her some money, enough to get her to another town where she could start fresh. But would that be enough? What would a pregnant, unmarried woman do in another town that she could not do in Gila City? The more he thought about it, the more complicated the situation became. And yet, looking at her sleeping face, peaceful now in the firelight, Benjamin felt something stir in his chest that he had not felt in a long time. A desire to protect, to provide, to be something more than just a lone hunter moving through the wilderness. He shook his head at himself. One day of knowing this woman, and he was already thinking foolish thoughts. Still, he could not shake the feeling that finding her in that storm had changed something fundamental, had set him on a different path than the one he had been walking. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountains. Inside, the fire crackled and the small shack held fast against the wind. Benjamin settled himself on the floor near the fire, using his saddle as a pillow, and eventually fell into a light sleep, the kind of rest he had learned in his years in the wilderness, where part of him remained alert even while his body rested. He woke several times during the night to tend the fire and check on Rebecca. Each time he found her sleeping peacefully, the color returned to her face, her breathing deep and regular. The baby seemed active, and he could see the ripple of movement beneath the blankets occasionally. A tough little thing, to have survived what its mother had endured. Dawn came slowly, the light filtering gray and dim through the storm. The wind had died down some, but snow still fell steadily. Benjamin judged they would be here at least another day, maybe 2. He had enough supplies for that, though they would be eating light. Buck was content to stand in the corner of the shack, occasionally munching on the dry grass Benjamin had stored there for such emergencies. Rebecca woke mid-morning, her eyes finding Benjamin immediately. He was sitting by the fire, working on repairing a tear in his saddlebag with an awl and leather thread. "How are you feeling?" he asked when he noticed she was awake. "Sore, tired, but warm and alive." She paused. I need to. There is a chamber pot in that corner," Benjamin said, pointing without looking up, saving her the embarrassment. "I will step outside for a bit, give you privacy. But the storm has let up enough that I can stand on the other side of the door for a few minutes without dying," he said with a slight smile. "Take your time." He pulled on his heavy coat and hat and stepped outside, closing the door behind him. Rebecca waited a moment, then carefully stood, keeping the blanket wrapped around her. Her legs were shaky and her muscles ached, but she managed. When she was done and had settled back on the cot, she called out, "You can come back in." Benjamin returned, shaking snow from his coat. His face was reddened from the cold, but he did not seem bothered by it. "Storm is still going, but not as fierce. Should blow itself out by tonight or tomorrow morning." "Then what happens?" Rebecca asked, voicing the question that had been haunting her since she woke. Benjamin came to sit in the chair again, his expression thoughtful. "That depends on what you want to happen. I have been thinking on it through the night, and I see a few possibilities." "I am listening." "First option, I give you some money and help you get to another town, Silver City maybe, or even Tucson. Somewhere you could start fresh where nobody knows your history. It would be hard, but you are resourceful enough to survive if you had a stake to start with." Rebecca nodded slowly. "What is the second option?" "You stay in Gila City. I know a woman there, Rosita Martinez. She runs a boarding house and is not the judgmental type. She might be willing to take you in, let you work for your room and board until the baby comes, and then we figure out the next step." "And the third option?" Benjamin hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "This one is going to sound strange, given that we have only known each other for a day. But I am going to say it anyway, because it is the most practical solution I can think of." He met her eyes directly. "You could marry me?" Rebecca stared at him, certain she had misheard. "What?" "Hear me out," Benjamin said, leaning forward in the chair. "I know it sounds crazy, but think about it practically. You need protection and a name for your child. I have both to offer. I make a decent living as a hunter and scout. I own a small property outside Gila City. Nothing fancy, but it is mine and paid for. I could provide for you and the baby." "But why would you do that? You do not know me. You do not love me." "No, I do not love you," Benjamin agreed. "But I respect you. Any woman strong enough to survive what you survived, who fights that hard to protect her unborn child, that is someone worth standing beside. As for why I would do it, maybe I am tired of being alone. Maybe finding you in that storm was not just luck, but something meant to happen. Or maybe I just cannot stand the thought of leaving you to face the world alone when I have the means to help." Rebecca's mind reeled. Marriage to a stranger was not something she had ever imagined, and yet what choice did she really have? The other options he presented were fraught with danger and uncertainty. At least this way, her child would have a name, a home, a father of sorts. And Benjamin, strange as it seemed, felt like someone she could trust. "You would claim the child as yours?" she asked quietly. "Even knowing it is not?" "I would. The child deserves a father, and I could be that. I might not be the one who planted the seed, but I could be the one who helps it grow." People would talk. They would count the months and know. Let them talk. People always talk. What matters is that you and the baby would be safe and provided for. Benjamin paused. "I am not saying it would be a perfect marriage or even a normal one. I am gone a lot for my work. But I would be honest with you, and I would do right by you and the child. That much I can promise." Rebecca looked at him for a long moment, this stranger who had saved her life and was now offering her a future she had thought lost. There was kindness in his eyes, and strength, and an honesty that she found herself believing. She thought of the alternative, of struggling alone in a strange town, of raising her child in poverty and shame. "If I said yes," she said slowly, "what would you expect of me? As a wife, I mean." Benjamin understood what she was asking. "I would expect you to keep house, to be a partner in running the household. I would expect honesty and respect. As for the other, the intimate part of marriage, that could wait until you were ready, if you are ever ready. I would not force myself on you. That is not the kind of man I am." "You would really do that?" Marry me for practical reasons, help raise a child that is not yours, and ask nothing in return? I did not say nothing in return. I would ask for companionship, for someone to come home to, for a partner in building a life. That might not sound like much, but it is more than I have now. He smiled slightly. And your cooking would probably be better than mine, which would be a significant improvement in my daily life. Despite everything, Rebecca found herself smiling a little at that. I am a decent cook, I will give you that. They were quiet for a moment, the weight of the decision hanging between them. I do not need an answer right now, Benjamin said. Think on it. We are stuck here for at least another day anyway. Whatever you decide, I will help you one way or another. You have my word on that. Rebecca nodded, grateful for the time to think. It was an enormous decision, one that would shape the rest of her life and her child's life. And yet, as she watched Benjamin move around the small space, as she observed the gentle way he tended his horse and the capable way he managed their limited resources, she felt a growing certainty that this strange offer might be exactly what she needed. They spent the rest of that day in quiet companionship. Benjamin told her about his life, about growing up on a small ranch in Texas before his parents died of fever when he was 17. He had drifted west, working various jobs, until he fell in with a group of Apache and learned their ways. He spoke of Nantaje, the elder who had taught him, with deep respect and affection. Rebecca, in turn, told him about her life in Gila City, about her father's small farm that never quite produced enough, about her mother's gentle sadness, about her two brothers who had inherited their father's hardness without any of his early kindness. She told him about James, the traveling merchant who had swept her off her feet with his charm and promises, and how consumption had taken him so fast it seemed impossible. I really did love him, she said quietly. I know people will think I was just a foolish girl who let herself be seduced, but it was real. We were going to be married. I believe you, Benjamin said simply. Love is not always convenient or tidy. Sometimes it comes and goes faster than we would like. As night fell on their second evening in the shack, the storm finally began to break. The wind died down to occasional gusts, and the snow tapered off to light flurries. Benjamin stood at the door, looking out at the clearing sky. We will be able to leave tomorrow, he announced. The snow will be deep, but Buck can manage it, and it will have stopped falling by morning. Rebecca felt her heart skip with nervousness. Tomorrow they would return to civilization, and she would have to make her decision. She watched Benjamin's silhouette in the doorway, this man who had appeared in her darkest moment, like an answer to a prayer she had not even known how to pray. Benjamin, she said quietly. He turned to look at her. If your offer still stands, I would like to accept it. I will marry you. Something flickered in Benjamin's eyes, surprise perhaps, or satisfaction, or maybe something deeper that he was not ready to name. He moved to sit in the chair, facing her. You are sure? I do not want you to feel pressured. I am sure. You are right that it is practical. But more than that, I think you are a good man. I have met enough bad ones to recognize the difference. And if I have to marry for practical reasons, I would rather marry someone good. Benjamin nodded slowly. Then we will do it properly. When we get back to Gila City, we will find a preacher and make it legal and binding. I will get you a ring, nothing fancy but something respectable, and we will set up house together and figure out the rest as we go. Thank you, Rebecca said, feeling tears prick her eyes again. Thank you for giving me a future when I thought I had none. We are giving each other a future, Benjamin corrected gently. This is not charity, Rebecca. This is two people deciding to face the world together instead of alone. That makes us both stronger. They sealed the agreement with a handshake, awkward given that Rebecca was wrapped in blankets and Benjamin had to lean forward from the chair. But it felt right, felt honest. And Rebecca found herself believing that maybe, just maybe, this strange twist of fate might turn out to be a blessing in disguise. The next morning dawned cold but clear. The storm had passed, leaving behind a world transformed by snow. The drifts were deep, 3 feet in some places, but the sky was a brilliant blue and the sun shone with crystalline brightness on the white landscape. Benjamin had carefully returned Rebecca's clothes to her after drying them by the fire overnight. They were wrinkled and worse for wear, but they were dry and would serve until they could get her back to civilization. He turned his back while she dressed, giving her privacy, though the close quarters made modesty somewhat moot. "I'm going to need to get some proper dresses," Rebecca said, struggling to fasten the dress around her swollen belly. It had been tight before her ordeal, now it barely closed. "This one is not going to last much longer. We will take care of that in town," Benjamin assured her. "I know a seamstress who can make you some dresses appropriate for your condition." He saddled Buck and helped Rebecca mount, then swung up behind her. The horse was strong and steady, used to carrying heavy loads of game, and did not seem bothered by the double burden. Benjamin kept one arm secure around Rebecca's waist, both to keep her steady and to share his warmth in the bitter cold. The ride back to Benjamin's property took most of the day. The snow made progress slow, and they had to stop frequently to let Buck rest. Rebecca found herself leaning back against Benjamin's solid chest, finding comfort in his steady presence. She could feel the baby moving inside her, active and healthy, despite everything they had been through. "How far along are you?" Benjamin asked at one point, his voice close to her ear. "About 6 months, I think. The baby is due in June, near as I can figure. That gives us time to prepare properly, get a cradle built, stock up on necessities." The casual way he said us and we made something warm bloom in Rebecca's chest. She was not alone anymore. She had a partner, however unconventional their partnership might be. Benjamin's property was located about 5 miles outside Gila City proper, a small plot of land with a sturdy cabin, a barn, and a corral. It was modest but well-maintained, and Rebecca felt a surge of relief when she saw it. This was to be her home, her safe haven. Benjamin helped her down from the horse and guided her into the cabin while he took care of Buck. The interior was sparse but clean, the kind of place a bachelor might keep. There was a main room with a stone fireplace, a table and chairs, a few shelves with supplies. A door led to what she assumed was a bedroom, and another door opened to what looked like a small pantry. Rebecca stood in the middle of the room, trying to take it all in, trying to imagine herself living here. It was so different from her father's farm, from the life she had known. But it could be home, she thought. With some work and some love, it could be home. Benjamin came in a few minutes later, stomping snow from his boots. "It is not much," he said, looking around as if seeing it through her eyes. "But it keeps the weather out and has a good fireplace. We can make improvements as we go." "It is fine," Rebecca said honestly. "It is more than I had yesterday." They looked at each other across the small room, two strangers about to become husband and wife, bound together by circumstance and choice in equal measure. "We should go into town tomorrow," Benjamin said. "Get you some proper clothes, talk to the preacher, make this official. The sooner we marry, the better for appearances. People will talk less if we are already wed when you start showing more." Rebecca nodded. She was already showing quite a bit, but her loose dress had hidden it somewhat. Soon there would be no hiding her condition, and she wanted the protection of marriage before that happened. That night, Benjamin insisted she take the bedroom while he slept on a bedroll in the main room. Rebecca was too tired to argue. She lay in his bed, which smelled of leather and wood smoke and something else indefinably masculine, and wondered at the strangeness of her life. 3 days ago, she had been living with her family, afraid but still safe. 2 days ago, she had been cast out to die. Yesterday, she had been fighting for her life in a blizzard, and now she was in a strange man's bed, preparing to marry him in the morning. Life, she reflected, could change with stunning speed. Morning came with bright sunshine, and the sound of Benjamin moving around in the main room, stoking the fire and preparing a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush and coffee. Rebecca emerged from the bedroom, her hair braided back, trying to look as presentable as possible in her worn dress. "Ready to go into town?" Benjamin asked. "As ready as I will ever be." They hitched Buck to a small wagon Benjamin kept in the barn, making the journey more comfortable for Rebecca. The road into Gila City was slushy with melting snow, and they passed several other travelers on the way, folks going about their business. Rebecca felt their eyes on her, felt them wondering who she was and what she was doing with Benjamin Quincy. Gila City was a rough mining town, grown up quickly around the silver strikes in the nearby mountains. It had a main street with a general store, a saloon, a hotel, a blacksmith, and various other businesses crammed together in haphazard fashion. The streets were muddy with snowmelt, and miners in rough clothes lounged outside the saloon, despite the early hour. Benjamin drove the wagon to the general store and helped Rebecca down. "Let us get you some fabric and whatever else you need. Then we will find Reverend Thomas and make this official." The general store was dim and crowded with goods of every description. The proprietor, a heavy-set man named Mr. Garrett, looked up when they entered, and his eyes widened slightly when he saw Rebecca. "Ben Quincy," he said, his tone curious. "Did not expect to see you in town this week. And who might this be?" "This is Rebecca Hartley, soon to be Rebecca Quincy," Benjamin said smoothly. "We are getting married today. She needs fabric for some new dresses." Mr. Garrett's eyebrows rose, but he was too good a businessman to ask impertinent questions when there was money to be made. "Well, congratulations. Let me show you what we have in stock." Rebecca selected several yards of sturdy calico in a dark blue and some in a practical brown, along with thread and buttons and other notions she would need. Benjamin added a few other items, including a small gold ring from Mr. Garrett's modest jewelry selection. It was simple, just a plain band, but it fit Rebecca's finger perfectly. "Keep it on," Benjamin said quietly. "You are as good as married already in my eyes." They found Reverend Thomas at the small clapboard church on the edge of town. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and a shock of white hair. When Benjamin explained what they wanted, the Reverend looked between them with concern. "This is rather sudden, is it not? I like to counsel couples before marriage, make sure they understand the commitment they are making." "We understand it," Benjamin said firmly. "And we have our reasons for wanting to marry quickly. Will you perform the ceremony or not?" Reverend Thomas hesitated, his eyes lingering on Rebecca's midsection, which was becoming more obvious in her tight dress. Understanding dawned in his expression, followed by a flicker of disapproval, but also compassion. "Very well," he said finally, "but I will want to speak with the young lady alone first, to make sure this is truly her choice." Benjamin nodded and stepped outside, leaving Rebecca alone with the Reverend. The old man gestured for her to sit in one of the pews. "Child," he said gently, "are you being coerced into this marriage? If you need help, I can provide it. There are other options." "No," Rebecca said clearly. "I am not being forced. Benjamin saved my life, and now he is offering me protection and a home. I am choosing this freely." "And the child you carry?" Rebecca stiffened. "Is mine and no one else's concern." "A child is always God's concern," Reverend Thomas said mildly. "But I am not here to judge you, only to make sure you are entering into this marriage with clear eyes and a willing heart." Benjamin is a good man, and I trust him. That is more than many women can say about their husbands." The Reverend studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. If this is your choice, I will marry you. But understand that marriage is a sacred bond, not to be entered into lightly." "I understand." Reverend Thomas called Benjamin back in and performed a simple ceremony there in the empty church. There were no guests, no flowers, no celebration. Just two people standing before God and making promises to each other. When it came time to exchange vows, Rebecca found her voice steady and clear, and Benjamin's deep voice echoed through the small space with quiet conviction. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Thomas said finally. "You may kiss your bride." Benjamin leaned down and pressed a chaste kiss to Rebecca's lips, brief and respectful. It was their first kiss, Rebecca realized, and it felt strange to share it after already agreeing to spend their lives together. But it also felt right, a seal on the bargain they had made. They signed the registry, making it legal and binding, and Benjamin paid the Reverend for his services. As they walked out of the church into the bright sunshine, Rebecca looked down at the simple gold band on her finger. Mrs. Rebecca Quincy. She had a new name and a new life, and she was determined to make the best of it. "How do you feel?" Benjamin asked as he helped her into the wagon. "Like I jumped off a cliff and found out I could fly," Rebecca admitted. Benjamin smiled, the expression transforming his usually serious face. "That is a good way to put it. Let us hope we keep flying." They stopped by the boarding house run by Rosita Martinez, so Benjamin could introduce his new wife. Rosita was a plump Mexican woman in her 40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She looked Rebecca up and down, taking in her worn dress and obvious pregnancy, then turned to Benjamin with raised eyebrows. "You got married," she said flatly. "Just this morning. Rosita, this is my wife Rebecca." "Rebecca, Rosita is one of the few people in this town I actually trust." Rosita's expression softened slightly. She reached out and took Rebecca's hands in hers. "Welcome, Mia. I hope this rough cowboy treats you well. If he does not, you come to me, and I will straighten him out." "I will keep that in mind," Rebecca said, finding herself smiling at the woman's fierce protectiveness. "You will need help when the baby comes," Rosita continued, her eyes on Rebecca's belly. "I have delivered many babies. You send for me when your time comes, yes?" "Yes, thank you." Rosita nodded, satisfied. "Now go home, both of you. You are newlyweds, even if it is a strange way you come to it. Go make a home together." The drive back to the cabin was quiet, both of them processing the enormity of what they had just done. Rebecca watched the landscape roll by, the snow melting in the warm afternoon sun, and tried to imagine her future in this wild, rough country, with this quiet, competent man beside her. When they arrived home, Benjamin carried in the supplies they had purchased while Rebecca stood in the doorway, looking at the small cabin with new eyes. This was her home now, her responsibility. She moved inside and began putting things away, familiarizing herself with where everything was kept. "I need to go check my traps and see about some work I had lined up," Benjamin said after a while. "Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" "I will be fine," Rebecca assured him. "I want to start on these dresses anyway. The sooner I have something that fits properly, the better." Benjamin nodded and headed out, leaving Rebecca alone in the cabin. She stood in the quiet space for a moment, then rolled up her sleeves and got to work. She had fabric to cut and seams to sew, and keeping her hands busy would help quiet her racing mind. The afternoon passed quickly. Rebecca cut out the pieces for 2 dresses, simple designs that would accommodate her growing belly and be practical for daily wear. She was a skilled seamstress, having learned from her mother, and the familiar work soothed her nerves. As she sewed, the baby moved inside her, little flutters and kicks that reminded her why she had made the choices she had made. Benjamin returned as the sun was setting, carrying a brace of rabbits. "Thought we could have fresh meat for dinner," he said, holding them up. "I will cook them if you clean them," Rebecca offered. They worked together in companionable silence, Benjamin skinning and cleaning the rabbits outside, while Rebecca prepared the rest of the meal. There was something deeply domestic about the scene, something that felt like the beginning of a real partnership. Dinner was simple, but good. Roasted rabbit with wild onions and some cornbread Rebecca made from Benjamin's stores. They ate at the small table, the firelight casting dancing shadows on the walls. "This is good," Benjamin said after a few bites. "Much better than my usual cooking." "What is your usual cooking?" "Charred meat and burned coffee mostly." Rebecca laughed, the sound surprising her. She had not laughed in so long. "Well, you will eat better now." "That alone makes this marriage worthwhile," Benjamin said, and though his tone was light, there was sincerity beneath it. After dinner, they fell into a routine that would become familiar in the days and weeks to come. Benjamin tended to the evening chores, while Rebecca cleaned up from the meal and continued working on her sewing. When full dark fell, they sat by the fire, not talking much, but comfortable in each other's presence. "You should take the bedroom again tonight," Benjamin said eventually. "I am fine out here." "Benjamin, this is your home. You should sleep in your own bed. I can sleep out here. You are pregnant and recovering from nearly freezing to death. You need a proper bed." "We are married now," Rebecca said quietly. "We could share the bed. I trust you to be a gentleman about it." Benjamin looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "I am sure. It is practical, and it is cold at night. We might as well share warmth." So they did. It was awkward at first, both of them acutely aware of the other's presence in the narrow bed. But Benjamin kept to his side, and Rebecca kept to hers, and eventually exhaustion pulled them both into sleep. The days that followed fell into a pattern. Benjamin would leave early to check his traps and hunt, returning by afternoon with whatever game he had caught. Rebecca kept house, cooked, sewed, and gradually made the cabin more of a home. She made curtains for the windows from some spare fabric. She organized the pantry and scrubbed every surface until it gleamed. She planted some herbs in small pots near the window, dreaming of a proper garden come spring. Benjamin was gone sometimes for days at a time when he took scouting jobs, and Rebecca found herself missing him during those absences. He was not a talkative man, but his presence was steady and reassuring. She felt safe when he was near, in a way she had not felt safe in a long time. For his part, Benjamin found himself thinking about Rebecca constantly when he was away. He would be tracking elk or surveying a route for a wagon train, and his mind would drift to the image of her sitting by the fire, sewing or reading one of his few books, the lamplight turning her hair to burnished copper. He had never been a man who needed company, but he found himself hurrying home now, eager to see her, to hear about her day, to share a meal together. It was not love, not yet, but it was something that was growing between them like a seedling pushing up through hard ground. One evening in late April, Rebecca was washing dishes when she felt a sharp pain low in her belly. She gasped and gripped the edge of the wash basin, waiting for it to pass. When it did, she straightened slowly, her hand on her stomach. The baby was moving restlessly, more active than usual. "Are you all right?" Benjamin asked from behind her, concern in his voice. "I think so. Just a pain. It is gone now." But an hour later, another pain came, stronger this time, and then another. Rebecca realized with dawning fear that something was wrong. It was too early. She was not due for another 2 months. "Benjamin," she said, trying to keep her voice calm, "I think you need to get Rosita. I think the baby is coming." Benjamin's face went pale. "Now, but it is too soon." "I know, but something is happening. Please, go get Rosita. Hurry." Benjamin did not waste time with more questions. He ran for Buck, saddled him in record time, and rode hell-bent for Gila City. The trip normally took an hour. He made it in 45 minutes, pounding on Rosita's door hard enough to rattle the frame. Rosita took one look at his face and knew, the baby is coming. Too early, 2 months too early. Rosita's expression grew grim, but she moved with swift efficiency, gathering supplies into a bag. "Get my wagon hitched. We go now." The ride back to the cabin felt like it took forever, though they made good time. Benjamin's mind raced with terrible possibilities. Women died in childbirth. Babies born too early often did not survive. He had promised to protect Rebecca, and now she was facing the most dangerous thing a woman could face, and he was helpless to save her. They found Rebecca in the bedroom, curled on her side, her face pale and drawn with pain. Rosita swept in and immediately took charge, sending Benjamin to boil water and fetch clean linens. He obeyed gratefully, glad to have something to do with his hands. The labor was long and hard. Benjamin paced the main room, listening to Rebecca's cries of pain, feeling each one like a knife to his gut. Hours crawled by. Night deepened into the dark time before dawn, when the world seems to hold its breath. And then, finally, a different sound, the thin, reedy cry of a newborn baby. Benjamin stood frozen, barely daring to hope. The baby's cry continued, growing stronger. Then Rosita appeared in the doorway, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. Her expression was weary, but relieved. "You have a son," she said. "Small, very small, but alive and breathing. The next few days will be critical. But he is a fighter, this one." Benjamin crossed the room in 3 strides and looked down at the tiny face peeking from the blanket. The baby was indeed small, frightening small, his skin red and wrinkled, but his eyes were open, dark and aware, and his little chest rose and fell with regular breaths. "Rebecca?" Benjamin asked, tearing his gaze from the baby. "She is exhausted, but she will be fine. She is strong, that one. It was not an easy birth, but she came through it." Benjamin took the baby carefully, afraid he might break something, and carried him to the bedroom. Rebecca was propped up in bed, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but smiling weakly. "Look what we made," she whispered, reaching for the baby. Benjamin carefully placed the infant in her arms, watching as she looked down at her son with a love so fierce it took his breath away. And in that moment, looking at Rebecca cradling the baby, something shifted in Benjamin's chest. The walls he had built around his heart, the defenses that had kept him alone and safe for so many years, began to crumble. This was his family now. This woman and this child. Not by blood, perhaps, but by choice. And that made it just as real. "He needs a name," Rebecca said softly. Benjamin had been thinking about this. What about James, after his father? James Benjamin Quincy. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that? Give him his father's name? His father should be remembered. James was part of making this little fighter. He deserves to be honored." "James Benjamin Quincy," Rebecca repeated, testing the name. "It is perfect. Thank you." Rosita stayed with them for 3 days, teaching Rebecca how to care for such a small baby, how to help him nurse, how to keep him warm and safe. Little James was tiny, barely 5 pounds, but he was determined to live. He nursed eagerly despite his size, and his cries grew stronger each day. On the 3rd day, Rosita declared that she thought the baby would survive. He is small, but he has the will to live. Keep him warm, keep him fed, and watch for any signs of illness. But I think he will be fine. After Rosita left, Benjamin and Rebecca settled into the new reality of life with an infant. The baby needed to be fed every few hours, day and night, and Rebecca was exhausted from the birth and the constant demands. Benjamin helped however he could, walking the floor with James when he fussed, changing his diapers, bringing Rebecca food and water while she nursed. One night, about a week after James was born, Benjamin was sitting in the rocking chair he had made years ago, holding the sleeping baby against his chest. Rebecca had finally fallen asleep in the bedroom, worn out from another long day. Benjamin looked down at the tiny face, peaceful now in sleep, and felt his heart expand with an emotion he had never experienced before. This was his son, not by blood, but by love and choice. This little life depended on him, trusted him, needed him. And Benjamin found that he wanted nothing more than to be worthy of that trust. He thought about his own father, dead these many years, and the lessons he had taught Benjamin before fever took him. Be honest, work hard, protect those who cannot protect themselves. Benjamin had tried to live by those lessons, but he had done it alone, keeping the world at arm's length, no more. He had a family now, and that changed everything. Rebecca appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a shawl, her hair loose around her shoulders. "I thought you would be asleep," she said softly. "Could not sleep, wanted to hold him for a bit." Rebecca came to stand beside the rocking chair, looking down at their son. "He looks like James," she said quietly, around the eyes. "He has your determination. That much I can already see." They were quiet for a moment, the only sound the baby's soft breathing and the crackle of the fire. "Benjamin," Rebecca said, her voice hesitant, "I want you to know something. When I agreed to marry you, it was for practical reasons, for protection and survival. But these past weeks, living with you, watching you care for me and for James, I have come to realize something." "What is that?" "I am falling in love with you." Benjamin looked up at her, his breath catching. "Rebecca, you do not have to say anything," she continued quickly. "I know this was supposed to be a practical arrangement, but I wanted you to know how I feel. You have been nothing but kind and honorable, and you have given me and my son a life I thought we would never have. How could I not love you?" Benjamin stood carefully, still holding the sleeping baby, and looked at Rebecca in the firelight. "I was going to wait to say this, was not sure it was the right time, but I am falling in love with you too. I think I started falling the moment I saw you lying in that snow, fighting so hard to survive, and every day since, watching you become stronger, watching you become a mother, watching you make this cabin into a home, I have fallen a little more." Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? This stopped being a practical arrangement for me weeks ago. You are my wife in every sense that matters, and I want you to be my wife in the senses we have been avoiding too, if you are ready for that." In answer, Rebecca stepped forward and kissed him, a real kiss this time, not the chaste peck from their wedding. Benjamin kissed her back, carefully mindful of the baby between them, pouring all his growing feelings into the connection of their lips. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "We should put James in his cradle," Rebecca whispered. They moved to the bedroom together, Benjamin gently laying the baby in the small cradle he had built beside the bed. James stirred but did not wake, his tiny fist curling against his cheek. That night, they consummated their marriage properly, coming together with tenderness and care. Benjamin was gentle, aware that Rebecca's body was still healing from childbirth, and Rebecca responded with a passion that surprised them both. It was not just physical union, but emotional as well, the final seal on the bond they had been forging since that day in the storm. Afterward, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, listening to James's soft breathing from the cradle beside them. "I love you," Rebecca whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Benjamin replied, and felt the truth of it settle into his bones. Spring turned to summer, and the family settled into their new life together. James grew stronger and bigger, though he remained small for his age. He was a happy baby, quick to smile and laugh, and both Benjamin and Rebecca doted on him shamelessly. Benjamin continued his work as a hunter and scout, but he was more selective about the jobs he took, unwilling to be away from his family for extended periods. He taught Rebecca to shoot, insisting that she needed to be able to protect herself and James when he was gone. She proved to be a natural, her hand steady and her aim true. They added to the property, building a proper chicken coop and getting some laying hens. Rebecca planted a large garden, and by summer's end, the pantry was stocked with preserved vegetables and fruits. They were building a life together, piece by piece. One evening in August, they were sitting on the porch they had built together, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. James was asleep in Rebecca's arms, his small face peaceful. Benjamin had his arm around Rebecca's shoulders, and she leaned into his solid warmth. "Are you happy?" Benjamin asked, the question coming out of nowhere. Rebecca considered it carefully. "Yes," she said finally. "I think I am. It is not the life I thought I would have, but it is better in ways I never imagined. I have you and James and this home we are building together. I have purpose and safety and love. What more could I want?" "I was thinking," Benjamin said slowly, "that maybe we should make things official with James. Legally adopt him so there is never any question that he is my son." Rebecca turned to look at him, her eyes shining. "You would do that?" "He is already my son in every way that matters. Might as well make it legal. No one can ever take him from us or question his place in our family that way." "Oh, Benjamin," Rebecca breathed and kissed him soundly. Yes, let us do that." They rode into town the next week and found a lawyer who drew up the adoption papers. Benjamin signed his name with a flourish, making it legal and binding. James Benjamin Quincy was officially his son, now and forever. News of the adoption spread through Sheila City, as all news did in a small town. Some folks were scandalized by the whole situation, whispering about the baby who came too soon and the hasty marriage. But most people saw what was plain to see, a family that loved each other, working hard to make a life together. And those voices drowned out the critics. Rebecca made friends with some of the other women in town, particularly Rosita, who became like a mother to her. She joined the church sewing circle and contributed to community events. She was no longer the outcast girl who had been banished to die in a storm. She was Mrs. Benjamin Quincy, wife and mother, a respectable member of the community. Benjamin's reputation as a tracker and hunter grew, and he found himself with more work than he could handle. He started taking on an apprentice, a young Mexican man named Diego, teaching him the skills he had learned from the Apache. It meant more income for the family, and less time Benjamin had to spend away from home. As autumn came on, painting the high country in shades of gold and red, Rebecca realized she was pregnant again. She told Benjamin one evening after they had put James down to sleep. He had just turned 1 year old, walking now on wobbly legs and chattering in a language only he understood. "Are you sure?" Benjamin asked, his hand moving immediately to her still flat stomach. "I am sure. The baby should come in early spring." A grin spread across Benjamin's face, wide and unguarded in a way he rarely allowed himself. He swept Rebecca into his arms and spun her around laughing. "We are having another baby!" "We are," Rebecca confirmed, laughing with him. "Are you happy about it?" "Happy? I am thrilled. James needs a brother or sister. And I love being a father. I love our family. I love everything about this life we have built. Even the early mornings and the dirty diapers and the sleepless nights. Even those," Benjamin said, setting her down gently and cupping her face in his hands. "Rebecca, you and James are the best things that ever happened to me. Another child is just more blessing." They told James he was going to be a big brother, though at 1 year old, he had no idea what that meant. He just grinned his toothy grin and clapped his hands, happy because his parents were happy. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Rebecca remained healthy and strong. Benjamin was attentive and protective, doing extra work around the property so Rebecca could rest more. They prepared for the new baby, building another cradle and sewing more tiny clothes. In March of 1884, 2 years almost to the day after Benjamin had found Rebecca dying in the snow, their daughter was born. Unlike James's early and difficult birth, this one was quick and uncomplicated. Benjamin paced the main room while Rosita attended Rebecca. and barely 3 hours after the labor started, he heard the strong cry of a healthy infant. "Another fighter," Rosita announced, bringing out a baby wrapped in a soft blanket. "A daughter this time, and she has good lungs." Benjamin looked down at his daughter's red, scrunched-up face and felt that same overwhelming wave of love he had felt when he first held James. "She is perfect. She is loud," Rosita said with a laugh. "But yes, perfect." They named her Emily Rose Quincy, and she was indeed loud and demanding from the start. Where James had been a relatively easy baby, Emily wanted what she wanted when she wanted it and made sure everyone knew it. But she was also full of smiles and laughter, and both Benjamin and Rebecca fell completely in love with her. James, now a wobbly toddler of 16 months, was fascinated by his baby sister. He would stand by her cradle and babble to her, and Emily seemed to respond to his voice, turning toward him and quieting when he was near. "They will be close," Rebecca predicted, watching her children together. "I can already see it." Life became busier with two small children, but it was a good kind of busy. Benjamin found he did not mind the sleepless nights or the constant demands. This was what he had been missing all those years he had spent alone. This noise and chaos and love, this sense of purpose beyond just surviving. He still hunted and scouted, but he had built up enough savings that he could afford to be more selective. He turned down jobs that would take him away for more than a few days. His family was more important than any amount of money. One evening, when Emily was about 6 months old and James was nearly 2, the family was sitting together by the fire. James was playing with some carved wooden animals Benjamin had made for him, and Emily was nursing contentedly. Rebecca looked up at Benjamin, who was watching his family with an expression of such contentment it made her heart ache. "What are you thinking about?" she asked softly. "About how different my life would have been if Buck had not stopped that day in the storm. If we had ridden past without seeing you, you would have died, and James would have died with you, and I would still be alone, hunting and drifting, and never knowing what I was missing. But Buck did stop. You did find me. We are here, together. I know, and I thank God for it every single day. You saved me just as much as I saved you, Rebecca. You gave me a reason to stop drifting and start building something that matters." Rebecca reached over and took his hand, their fingers intertwining. "We saved each other." The years passed, marked by the small milestones of family life. James learned to ride a horse at age 4, sitting proud in front of Benjamin on Buck's patient back. Emily said her first word at 10 months, and that word was Dada, much to Benjamin's delight and Rebecca's mock indignation. They expanded the property, adding more land and building a larger barn. Benjamin taught James to track animals and read signs in the wilderness. Rebecca taught Emily to sew and cook, though the little girl showed more interest in following her brother and father around than in domestic pursuits. In the spring of 1887, when James was 5 and Emily was 3, Rebecca gave birth to their third child, another boy they named Daniel Thomas Quincy. He was a placid baby, content to watch the world around him with serious dark eyes, so different from his loud sister and adventurous older brother. The family had grown, and so had their property. Benjamin had built a larger cabin, this one with 3 bedrooms and a proper sitting room. Rebecca had curtains on every window, and a garden that was the envy of their neighbors. They had become prosperous and respected, known for their hard work and strong family values. But success had not changed them fundamentally. Benjamin was still the quiet, thoughtful man who had pulled Rebecca from the snow, though he smiled more now and laughed often at his children's antics. Rebecca was still the strong woman who had survived abandonment and a killing storm, though she had found peace and security in Benjamin's love. They never forgot where they had come from, or what they had survived together. Every year on the anniversary of the day Benjamin found Rebecca, they marked it privately, telling their children the story of how their family began. The children loved the tale, asking to hear it again and again, though they softened some of the harder parts for young ears. James knew that Benjamin was not his biological father, but it never mattered to him. Benjamin was the only father he had ever known, the man who had raised him and loved him and taught him everything he knew. The bond between them was as strong as any blood tie could ever be. One evening in late summer of 1890, when James was 8, Emily was 6, and Daniel was 3, the family was gathered around the dinner table. A fourth child, a daughter named Sarah, was sleeping peacefully in her cradle in the corner. She had been born that spring, rounding out their family to 4 children. Benjamin looked around the table at his family, at the faces of his children and the woman he loved, and felt a contentment so deep it was almost painful. This was everything he had never known he wanted, this noise and love and chaos and joy. "Papa," James said, pulling Benjamin from his thoughts, "will you teach me to shoot tomorrow? You said when I turned 8 I was old enough." "I did say that," Benjamin agreed, "and I'm a man of my word. Tomorrow we will start your shooting lessons." "I want to learn too," Emily piped up immediately. "When you are 8, Benjamin told her. "Same as James." Emily pouted, but she knew better than to argue. Her father was fair but firm, and if he said she had to wait until 8, then she would wait. After dinner, Benjamin and Rebecca stood on the porch, watching the sun set over the mountains. The children were inside, supervised by a neighbor girl they had hired to help with the youngest ones. "Do you ever think about that day?" Rebecca asked, leaning into Benjamin's side. "The day you found me? All the time. It changed everything." "My father died last year," Rebecca said quietly. It was the first time she had mentioned her family in years. "Thomas came by the property to tell me. Said the old man regretted what he did at the end, wanted to see James, his grandson." "What did you tell him?" "I told him it was too late, that he made his choice when he left me to die in that storm, and I made mine when I chose you and the life we built together. I do not need his regrets or his forgiveness. I have everything I need right here." Benjamin pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. "No regrets?" "Not a single one. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible. You gave me love and children and a home. You gave me everything." "We gave each other everything," Benjamin corrected gently. "I was half a man before I found you, just drifting through life. You gave me purpose and love and a reason to build instead of just survive. Our children, this home, this life, we made it together." They stood together as the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared. Two people who had found each other in the worst circumstances and built something beautiful from the ashes of what had been. The years continued to pass, bringing with them both joys and sorrows, as life always does. Benjamin's old horse Buck finally passed away at the grand age of 25, and Benjamin mourned him like the old friend he was. They got new horses and new livestock, expanded the property even more. James grew into a fine young man, tall and strong like Benjamin, with his mother's quick mind and determination. He started courting a girl from town when he was 18, a sweet-natured girl named Annie who fit into the family like she had always been there. Emily proved to be a crack shot, just like her mother, and had a way with horses that was almost magical. She was fierce and independent, and Benjamin joked that they would have to lock her up to keep the boys away when she was older. Daniel was the scholar of the family, preferring books to hunting, though he could do both when needed. He talked about becoming a teacher one day, maybe even opening a school in Gila City. Little Sarah was only 5, but she already showed signs of being a blend of all her siblings, adventurous like James, determined like Emily, thoughtful like Daniel. In 1893, 11 years after that fateful day in the storm, Benjamin and Rebecca stood in front of Reverend Thomas again, this time to watch James marry his Annie. The church was full of friends and family, and Rebecca cried happy tears as she watched her firstborn son pledge his life to the girl he loved. "We did good," Benjamin whispered to her as they sat in the front pew. "We did very good," Rebecca agreed. After the wedding, there was a celebration at the Quincy property. Tables were laden with food, and music filled the air. Children ran and played while adults talked and laughed. It was everything a wedding celebration should be, full of joy and hope for the future. Benjamin found himself standing apart from the crowd for a moment, watching it all, when James came to stand beside him, his son, now a man, ready to start his own family. "Thank you," James said simply, "for everything, for choosing to be my father, for loving my mother, for giving me brothers and sisters and this life. Thank you." Benjamin felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You do not need to thank me. Being your father has been one of the greatest privileges of my life. I know my real father died before I was born, but you are the only father I have ever needed. I hope I can be half the man you are, half the father you have been." Benjamin pulled his son into a fierce embrace. "You will be a great father. I have no doubt about that." They stood together for a moment, father and son, connected not by blood, but by something deeper and more enduring, love, and choice, and the bonds forged through years of shared life. As the sun set on James's wedding day, Benjamin found Rebecca and pulled her into his arms for a dance. They moved together to the music, as comfortable with each other as two people could be after 11 years of marriage. "Happy?" Benjamin asked, the same question he had asked so many times over the years. "So happy I can hardly stand it," Rebecca replied, looking up at him with eyes full of love. "You are still the best thing that ever happened to me, Benjamin Quincy. And you are mine, Rebecca Quincy, now and always." They danced as the stars came out overhead, surrounded by their children and friends, celebrating the marriage of their eldest son and the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. The years that followed brought more grandchildren, first from James and Annie, then eventually from Emily, when she married a rancher named Robert and settled on land adjacent to the Quincy property. Daniel did become a teacher, opening a small school in Gila City and marrying a quiet girl named Margaret who taught alongside him. Sarah, the baby of the family, was still too young for marriage, but she was already breaking hearts throughout Gila City with her wild spirit and independent ways. Benjamin and Rebecca grew older together, their hair turning gray, their faces gaining lines from years of laughter and hard work. But they were still as much in love as they had been in those early days, still finishing each other's sentences and communicating with just a glance. In the spring of 1902, 20 years after Benjamin had found Rebecca freezing in the snow, they celebrated their anniversary with a small party attended by their 4 children, their 3 sons and daughters-in-law, and 8 grandchildren, with a 9th on the way. Rebecca looked around at the gathered family, at all the lives that had sprung from that one moment when Benjamin had chosen to check what had caught Buck's attention in the storm, and felt overwhelming gratitude. All of this, all these people, existed because Benjamin had saved her life, and she had chosen to trust him enough to build a life together. "What are you thinking about?" Benjamin asked, coming to stand beside her with 2 cups of punch. "About that day," Rebecca said, accepting the cup. "About how close we came to never having any of this. If you had ridden past, if I had died 5 minutes before you arrived, if you had not offered to marry me, any one of those things going differently, and none of this exists. But it did not go differently. We found each other, we chose each other, and we built this." He gestured at the family gathered around them. "We did," Rebecca agreed, "and I would not change a single thing." James approached them, his oldest son perched on his shoulders. "Mama, Papa, we want to hear the story. The kids have been begging." Rebecca laughed. "They hear it every year, and they will want to hear it every year for the rest of their lives. It is a good story, the best kind of story, because it is true." So Benjamin and Rebecca gathered the children and grandchildren around and told them the story once again. About the storm and the cold, about Buck stopping and refusing to move, about the frozen woman in the snow and the cowboy who saved her, about the slow thawing by the fire and the practical proposal and the marriage that became something more. The children listened with wide eyes, even though they had heard it before. The grandchildren peppered them with questions, wanting to know every detail. And Benjamin and Rebecca answered patiently, remembering that terrible and wonderful day that had changed both their lives forever. As the sun set and the party wound down, Rebecca found herself on the porch of the house they had built together, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. Benjamin joined her, as he always did, and they stood together in comfortable silence. "No regrets?" Benjamin asked, the question that had become something of a tradition between them over the years. "Not a single one," Rebecca replied, also by tradition. "You? Only that I did not find you sooner, that you had to suffer before we found each other. But if you had found me sooner, I would have been a different person. James's father would still be alive, and I would have married him. We would never have met. True enough, I guess everything happened exactly as it needed to happen. Exactly as it needed to," Rebecca agreed. They stood together as darkness fell, 2 people who had survived the worst and found the best in each other. The house behind them was full of the sound of their children and grandchildren, the evidence of the life they had built from that one moment of grace in a snowstorm. Benjamin took Rebecca's hand, threading his fingers through hers, and they stood together, watching the stars emerge one by one in the darkening sky. They did not need words anymore. After 20 years together, they could communicate volumes with just a touch, a glance, a shared silence. Inside the house, someone started playing the old piano that had been Rebecca's pride and joy when Benjamin surprised her with it on their 10th anniversary. The sound of music drifted out onto the porch, mixed with laughter and the voices of children. "This is it," Rebecca said softly. "This is what happiness sounds like." "Yes," Benjamin agreed. "This is it, exactly." Years later, when Benjamin and Rebecca were both in their 60s and their children were grown with families of their own, they would sit together on that same porch and marvel at the life they had built. They had survived hard winters and dry summers, economic panics and personal sorrows. They had buried friends and celebrated victories. They had watched their children grow and their grandchildren multiply. Through it all, they had each other. The cowboy and the woman he found frozen in the snow, bound together by circumstance and choice, and a love that had grown deeper with every passing year. James became a successful rancher with 5 children of his own. Emily and her husband ran the largest horse breeding operation in the territory. Daniel's school flourished, educating generations of children in Gila City. Sarah, the wild child, became a respected horsewoman and trick rider, performing across the West with her husband, a former cavalry officer. On their 40th wedding anniversary in 1922, Benjamin and Rebecca were surrounded by 4 children, 14 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. The celebration was held on the property where they had built their life, under the same mountains where Benjamin had found Rebecca dying in the snow 4 decades earlier. Benjamin was 70 years old now, his dark hair completely white, his body still strong, but showing the wear of a life lived fully. Rebecca was 63, her beauty matured into something even more striking, her hair silver, and her eyes still as bright as they had been at 21. They danced together at the party, slowly, holding each other close. Around them, their families celebrated, but Benjamin and Rebecca were lost in their own world, remembering. 40 years, Rebecca said wonderingly. 40 years since you found me. 40 years of love and family and home. Best 40 years of my life, Benjamin replied. No question about it. Mine too. Even with all the hard times, all the struggles, I would not trade a single day. Nor I. They kissed sweetly, tenderly. The kiss of 2 people who knew each other completely and loved each other still. Around them, their family cheered and clapped, celebrating not just the anniversary, but the love that had created all of them. As the sun set that evening, Benjamin and Rebecca sat together on the porch one more time, as they had done thousands of times over the years. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren were scattered around the property, playing and talking and laughing. We did good, Rebecca said, echoing Benjamin's words from so many years ago. We did very good, Benjamin agreed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, holding hands, grateful beyond words for the life they had been given, for the storm that had driven Rebecca to the edge of death, for the horse that had stopped and sensed her presence, for the cowboy who had chosen to check, for the woman who had chosen to trust, for the love that had grown from such unlikely beginnings into something beautiful and enduring. Years would continue to pass. Eventually, Benjamin and Rebecca would reach the end of their journey, as all people must. But they would reach it together, surrounded by the evidence of the life they had built, the family they had created, the love they had nurtured for over half a century. And on quiet evenings, their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren would still tell the story of how it all began. About the pregnant woman banished into the storm, about the cowboy who found her frozen in the snow, about the slow thawing by the fire and the practical proposal that became the greatest love story any of them had ever known. It was a story worth telling, a story worth remembering, because it was a story about survival and choice and the unexpected ways that love can find us when we need it most. It was a story about 2 people who saved each other and built something beautiful from the ruins of what had been. It was, in short, their story. And it was perfect. Benjamin passed away peacefully in his sleep at age 76, with Rebecca beside him, as she had been for 46 years. His last words were to tell her he loved her, and her last words to him were the same. The funeral was attended by everyone in Gila City and beyond, a testament to the life he had lived and the man he had been. Rebecca followed him 8 months later, her heart simply giving out one morning as she sat in the rocking chair on the porch they had shared. She was found with a smile on her face, and the family liked to think she was seeing Benjamin again, waiting for her, as he always had. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the property they had built together, with a simple stone that read, Benjamin Quincy, 1854-1930, and Rebecca Quincy, 1861-1931. Together, they built a family, a home, and a love that will endure forever. And it did endure, in the children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who carried their blood and their values, in the stories that were passed down through generations, in the property that remained in the family, treasured and maintained as a reminder of where they all came from. The original cabin, the one Benjamin had carried Rebecca to that first terrible night, was preserved and maintained by the family as a memorial. And on clear days, if you stood on the porch and looked toward the mountains, you could almost see it. A cowboy on a buckskin horse, stopping in the snow because something had caught his attention, changing the course of two lives forever. That is how it began, with a storm and a choice and a moment of grace. And from that moment, everything else followed. Love and family and home and belonging. All the things that matter most in life, born from the instant when Benjamin Quincy decided to check what had caught his horse's attention in a snowstorm on a March day in 1882. It was the beginning of everything, and it was, in every sense that mattered, perfect.